Doing a little sound check. Is it working? Have to check the screen, make sure that we're up and going, and it sounds like we are. All right. Well, hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Human Podcast. We're here with some thoughts and opinions, of course. And today is March 12th, 2023. It's a Sunday. It's raining outside. Can't really go and do anything. I've been sick, really sick actually, last couple weekends, so I couldn't do much. But I'm going to try again. That's what life's all about, trying again. So let's get into it. There was a video posted last week, I believe, last weekend by Christian Guzman. Since then, all week long, there's been a lot of opinions put out. And the reason I am addressing it today and thought it might be an interesting topic to discuss is because I just watched a little earlier today a video by Greg Doucette speaking on the issue. So I figured I would put my own thoughts on it because I disagree with Greg a little bit on this issue. Not a little bit, I guess a lot, but that's not unusual. I tend to disagree with him on a lot of things. Not that he's not an expert, but some of his opinions about life in general. He's got good points. He has points that I think are very narrow to his own world view and his own individual experience of the world. And that's something important to take in mind. Sometimes our narrow perspective of the world, we like to think is the experience that everyone's having, which just isn't the case. The more you read in life, the more you experience what other humans go through, you tend to understand that we're all affected a little different. We all act a little different. I'm really lucky in my life. I've read an incredible amount of books. I've read an incredible amount of medical cases, and I've read a lot of legal cases. So I have a lot of knowledge beyond my own individual world perspective. And it does change you as a person. Getting out of your comfort zone really helps. But we all think differently. And so this is just my opinion. I'm not going to say any of this is fact. All I know is what I see that's put out there on social media, what's put out there in the public. I do not know Christian Guzman personally. I do not represent him or anything related to him. So, again, these are just thoughts and opinions, and that's okay to have and share with the world. I'd like to know what your thoughts and opinions are. Am I totally off base? Let's see. So, first off, Greg's opinion is that from his video today that he put out, he thinks that Christian is on some kind of drugs or something's off with him. So, from that perspective, I do not think that his behavior necessarily indicates something like cocaine abuse. That's something that people speculate. Usually, you see consistent behavior with someone who has cocaine abuse. There's a lot of things. I don't think he was up late partying the night before. I don't think, when people say partying, a lot of times they mean illicit drug use. In the United States, cocaine is an illegal drug for recreation. So that's definitely would be an issue if he was on something like that. And he does represent a large company. He represents his own brand. And of course, he's just a human in the world with family and friends that love and care about him. So you'd hope that that's not true. I don't think it is true from this one-off instance. And I also don't think the behavior can only be explained. There's a lot of other reasons for the kind of behavior that he had during the video. And I don't know, I didn't really think it was all that odd of a behavior. So let me just say, when I was paying attention to this particular podcast, I was incredibly sick myself. I mean, I had all kinds of stomach virus related symptoms, but I was showering. And so I was actually listening to his very long video, which honestly, I listened to it as if it was a podcast. So I listened to it. So just, you know, auditorily when I was observing. So I wasn't seeing all of his actions and behaviors. I was just listening to what he was saying because it was a stream of consciousness type video, similar to a podcast. And he did have some organization. He had some notes written down. That's not completely atypical for a podcast. I write my little notes down about what I want to say, pretty much keeping it simple. This is not like a professional production or anything of that nature. And I only have so much time in the day. I'm just a regular person. This isn't like my number one job or anything. I guess you could say that's a little different for a Christian, but honestly, he's making most of his money from, his business, his real business outside of YouTube. So I was in the shower. I was listening to this. I did think at one point it did seem like he was a little flustered with his thoughts. And I did think, briefly, like, this is not 100% podcast type speaking. I've heard him speak on a podcast. I think it was Don't Be Sour. That's a really great podcast, by the way. I don't always agree with everything they say, but I do find it incredibly entertaining. And at the end of the day, podcasts don't have to be 100% something you agree with. In fact, it's really good to listen to other people's thoughts and opinions that you don't immediately agree with everything they say. It's just nice to like have that worldview. It is very entertaining. So I've heard Christian Guzman speak on a few things on YouTube. I'm not someone who's been like an OG follower. People talk about following him for the last 10 plus years, anything like that. I'm more recent to knowing who he is as a person. I knew about the Ghost supplements first, and he does collaborations with them. So that's how I first learned about him. And that was only in the last couple of years since I started going to the gym and weightlifting myself. Once you start weightlifting, going to the gym, you tend to have a lot of social media algorithms change. A lot of the content that is pushed to me as a millennial woman is different now. Now that I go to the gym, I get a lot more gym advertisements, legging review advertisements, that type thing. So that's my perspective on this. I'm kind of a newbie to the gym world, the last 2 years, so to say. And I personally did not think that his behavior that was that unusual because, I've only seen, you know, maybe like more recent content from him. And so this is my first time really seeing his content that wasn't highly produced because most of the content I see with Christian in it, it's a highly produced, piece of work. It's usually for the Alpha Lee brand or some other YouTuber's video that has a lot of editing. So from my perspective, I didn't really know anything to compare this to. It seemed to me like just a regular person in the morning who is really excited about something, talking about what they're excited about. So, what was the purpose of his video? It was incredibly long. As we know, my podcasts that I've had and put out there have been really long. They're all lives, and then the lives just become the podcast that you can listen to. I kind of like the beauty of that. I like that it's just a slice of life, so to say. That reminds me a lot of live radio, and I'm a big fan of live radio. To me, as technology gets incredibly advanced, we tend to circle back around to what was working. The origins of radio and live broadcast on radio is kind of similar to the podcast I enjoy most, which is just live stream of thought infotainment. And that's what I'm trying to provide. And I feel like that was the vibe of the video that Christian Guzman was going for. It was more stream of consciousness. It was very real, very raw. And I think he wanted his emotions to be out there. I will say that he mentioned, whoops. Okay, let's see. There's a technical thing going on with my computer. I just want to make sure we're still casting. Okay. um, so I believe that he was going for a vibe, or the video was a vibe of just having that stream of consciousness, very real, very raw. Okay. So let's talk about some of the things that were brought up in the comment section of the video. I watched the video basically as soon as it got uploaded. That day I was sick, like I said, so I didn't, I just had the YouTube on. It got recommended to me immediately. So I was probably one of the, you know, first few people to watch it. But by the time the video was over, I could read the comments, and I was slightly surprised by some of the comments, which is okay. Um, so the comments talked about noticing his behavior. Is he okay? Or they were worried about his health. And some of the concerns were lack of sleep, stressed with too many things on his plate. Another concern was drug use, like Greg talked about. I think one of the drugs mentioned was Adderall, which is a prescription drug. So those are things I'm going to talk about. So first, I'm going to talk about working in politics. So I had a brief stint many years ago. I wouldn't say brief stint. Now that I talk about it, I've volunteered and worked in politics several times now. But there was one particular instance where it was really close to a major election event. It was a very critical election event, and it was for a presidential election. It was one of the primaries in one of the states that was key, one of the early quote unquote battleground states. And if you've ever volunteered for an organization or volunteered for a political candidacy, it is very intense. And this was a very intense election, as most presidential elections are. And this was a very hotly contested primary. So you're working on the campaign, you're driving around constantly. You literally, every single minute, every single moment leading up to that election is critical. You're on the phone cold calling people, you're putting up posters, you're making signs, when I say making signs, you're not making them from scratch. You're literally like putting them together so people can put them in their yards, because in really close, tight elections, sometimes you're looking for, okay, I need 10 more votes from this zip code, 11 more votes from that zip code. I mean, the numbers are really very specific, and you do every single thing in your power, working on a campaign, volunteering your time and effort because you believe in, the platform of the candidate. You're putting everything into it. And so this was something I did a lot in my 20s. And I would stay up. I think the longest I ever stayed up was 37 hours. It might have been longer. I got to a point where I was completely, I think other people would think I was lucid, but I was actually like quite out of my mind from lack of sleep. And that is a state of being that is insane. You're almost like awake but falling asleep at the same time. It's actually really dangerous, and it's something that you shouldn't drive. There's all kinds of really bad things. It was probably the most at risk I've ever put myself in physical harm, because I was having to drive and stop at different campaign election locations. Um, but when you're a really driven person and when you're really young and it's this thing that just feels like overwhelmingly important in your life, you do it. So, is it possible that what Christian Guzman was going through was something similar? Obviously, he's incredibly passionate about the topics that he was addressing on the video. They were basically his 10-year goals. So, for the next 10 years, what are the things that he wants to accomplish? He's obviously a very driven, very passionate person. My whole life, I've been around people like that. I've been around a lot of medical school folks, people who are getting their PhDs in cutting edge research and technology. I've been around people in law school. These are really highly motivated, driven people. And of course, it's the same for entrepreneurs. And that is what Christian is, I would say, is an entrepreneur. He's also someone who provides a lot of public entertainment. So I guess he's also a public figure. But he's very passionate about all these things. So one alternative that I think is, it's not just lack of sleep. There can be a little bit of an obsession that comes in, and it's very temporary. It's for a short, brief period of time in your life. And it sounds like his 30th birthday was kind of this big thing for him mentally and emotionally. If you've ever had like a milestone birthday like this, you kind of understand. It's kind of like this kick in the butt kind of thing. I believe Greg Doucette can probably relate because I think one of his big videos was when he turned 40 and like some of his life goals. So maybe he can relate to that. I just think Christian is probably a really incredibly passionate person. So that's one possible explanation. So the alternative, as far as drug use, that sort of thing, I've personally never been involved with it. It's not something or a hobby that I've done. But I have witnessed it and I do know it from a legal perspective. So going through law school, if you know anything about the legal field in general, the people in the legal field, substance abuse is rampant. It's really sad actually because it is such a stressful career. And even being in the school, the professional school itself is so highly stressful. There is rampant substance abuse. Of course, the substances include alcohol, which leads to alcoholism. Um, and cocaine is another like really big popular one because it keeps you active so that you can study because you're getting like 4 hours of sleep max, while you're in law school because of it's impossible the amount of work you have to do in a day to accomplish it all. It's literally impossible. And of course, you have to do it all by yourself because there's all these ethics involved in your work product has to be 100% your own and you have to have so many responsibilities. When you're in a professional school, it's like you have six bosses you have to answer to all at once. Well, it's not that dissimilar to someone who is a business owner, except his bosses, he is the boss, but he has other bosses he is responsible for. His own employees is a responsibility he has to answer to. The different heads of departments under him, those are things he has to answer to. If he has any legal issues going on, he has to answer to that. If there's contracts that need to be negotiated, he has to answer to that. It seems like he has his hands so wrapped up in it. He probably would benefit from having a mentor in the business field or maybe working with a professor at an MBA program, something like that, to help him structure his business a little better. I'm sure he's working on it or is getting advice for this. Sometimes it's impossible, like depending on what business you're in, the best advice is your own because a lot of folks do try to sabotage you or take advantage of you. And one of the most difficult things in business in general is trust. And he spoke about this in the video itself. He talked about how difficult it was with staff having people around him. One of the reasons he talked about with the video and his whole YouTube channel, it was one of his goals. So he talked a lot about the YouTube channel itself and him as a public persona, all of that, was that he didn't have the support staff around him or the support personnel around him to help him be at a level that he wants to be at currently. It seems like he's only one person and he's putting a lot of his effort into his businesses and kind of is just now thinking about refocusing and having the YouTube channel doing something that he really enjoys on its own. So it sounds like he really could benefit from focusing on getting some staff, some experts to help him with the YouTube channel. That would help him immensely because he's really the talent. He needs to be the person in front of the camera. Maybe he can come up with some concepts, right? But he doesn't really need to be the one that's doing all of the filming. Obviously, there are some mistakes in the video with the like camera falling over. He didn't have time to set up the camera. He didn't have time to really plan out the flow. Obviously, the editing, he didn't have time for that. I mean, I can relate. I'm just like a random person and I don't have time for any of that. I'm still trying to learn how to edit videos myself. It's a lot of work to try to do it yourself and have a lot of other responsibilities. I know I've mentioned in my other videos that, I do work full time. I have two other side hustles that, actually make money and income for me. This YouTube channel is just really something I do for fun. As much as it's kind of ironic, for Christian, based on his income streams, his YouTube channel is not an income stream. So really, he's only doing it for fun. I mean, in all honesty, he should probably have separate social media accounts, right, for his businesses. Well, he does. And so this is really his own personal um social media account, right? Where he posted this video is really just him and what he did from the beginning, which is what he loved the most. And I think he realized in the goals and talking about it in the morning within the video how important it was to him. And he needs to kind of get back to it to really fulfill his own personal happiness. And that's okay. So again, going back to the law school and understanding highly driven people, understanding, I've witnessed substance abuse among my peers in law school and in adults, actually, in the courthouses, both as lawyers and then also the folks that were being represented by lawyers in the courthouse. I don't think in this particular video that it was 100% there was some kind of substance abuse. Of course, you can never know unless you do a blood test on someone, you know, if they have a substance, because not everyone reacts the same. But I definitely think that there's a very real, alternative, viable explanation to all of this that does not include drugs. With that being said, we know um, as people who are in the fitness world, if you watch enough, if you know enough about bodybuilding, if you go to the gym and you're doing a lot of weightlifting, you know that people who are IFBB pros or people trying to be a pro in the bodybuilding world, that's not something you can do naturally. It's just not. Greg Doucette himself has a ton of YouTube videos and YouTube content about calling out major influencers, natty or not. Well, in this instance, we are 100% clear on the fact that Christian Guzman is not 100% natty because he said it. He said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my IFBB Pro card. And he said it again in this video. And that just lets you know he is doing whatever he needs to do, which is like a little bit of a wink and a nod, right? He's doing whatever he needs to do to get to that. And you're not going to achieve it naturally. You're just not. Maybe if you have godlike genetics, but he doesn't. He's been working out now for, I guess, a decade or more of his life. And he has had a sudden gain in muscle mass in a very short time. So I think we can all use our brains and know that he is on something beyond, taking creatine. It's not a new workout program, okay? I don't think he's hiding this. I don't think he's being dishonest. I think Christian is being very upfront and he's having to protect himself in a legal sense from saying exactly what it is. He's just letting you know that he's doing whatever it takes. I think we know what that means. We're smart people. So he's probably on something. If you're on something, guess what? It is going to impact your personality. Period. If you are influencing your hormones, if you're causing different chemical changes in your body, I think we've all been through puberty. We understand what having an influx of hormones of any kind, more testosterone, more whatever, we understand how that changes and impacts our brains because I don't think anyone listening to this hasn't experienced puberty. If you're a female listening, then you understand the 28-day or 29-day cycle, right? Women have a hormone cycle that's about a month long. Men go through a 24-hour hormone cycle. So if you're a dude, you may notice that you have a lot of energy early in the morning that kind of tapers on as the night goes down. By the end of the day, you're probably crazy tired, That's the male cycle, hormone daily cycle, and there's less variation for men than it is for women. Women go through a crazy hormone cycle, and again, it's a month-long cycle. So each week, you're gonna have a different person, essentially. Um, and that's what we're seeing here. He said, that the video was filmed first thing in the morning. So we know just his regular hormones, his testosterone was at its peak, well, if he's an average person in that morning, but we don't know if he was doing any of his other um uh so, substances that he needs to again get that IFBB pro card. We don't know how recent that was, how that fluctuate impacted his normal male hormone cycle, on the 24-hour scale, but we know it was in the morning. So he was probably having a flood of hormones, and that's a difficult thing to experience and to understand. Greg Doucette is a really good example of someone who has admitted that he has used whatever it would take for him to get his IFBB Pro card, which he has. And I think he should be probably the last person to judge or make a video about someone. I don't think his video was negative in any way. I think it came from a place of care and concern. I think most people seem to be very concerned about him. I'm just kind of like, I don't think we need to be that concerned. He is a very wealthy, multi millionaire. He's got a lot of great family support. His parents, his brothers, his sisters. Obviously, he's in a loving, committed relationship. He seems like he has a nice staff support around him. So I don't think us average people really need to be worried about him. I think he'll have it handled. This was probably just how he really is right now. This is what someone raw and uncut, looks like when they're going through a cycle, in the bodybuilding world. And we don't always see that. We don't always see that raw side of how it impacts people's personality. And I don't believe that he has been on it for a very long time. This might be his, first time going through these cycles. And so they're probably figuring out, how his body's reacting to it. We don't know. It sounds like for most of his weightlifting, career, he wasn't using these enhancements, so to say. So that's one explanation. So I think I've given two so far, but here's my last one. So he could just be a really excited guy. He said he's incredibly excited. If we just take it at face value, maybe he really is just genuinely overwhelmed with his emotions. I'm someone who is neurodivergent. I've been around people who are neurodivergent. He did sound like he was just incredibly excited, and he probably normally regulates himself or masks a lot in front of others. So maybe it is just what he said. And my reason for believing that is because if you remember in the video when the dog kept going crazy running over to the fence, well, the dog knew that it was going to get a treat from the neighbor, right? Got that memorized. We learned that in the video that Christian Guzman gets along really well with his neighbors. I thought that was actually a really normal conversation between two neighbors that seemed to be happy to be neighbors. So just looking at that interaction with it was the only other real human, right, that got to see him in person. She didn't seem to be concerned about him. She was treating him and talking to him like, a regular person, like she would always talk to him. I didn't perceive any indication in the interaction that he had with her that there was anything going on. And you would think if someone's like tweaking out or, scratching, itching, doing all the different things that indicate that someone is, on cocaine or excessive dose of Adderall, so to say. She seemed like a nice, happy neighbor interacting with another nice, happy neighbor. I didn't. I think we would have seen more concern or facial expression from her if she was concerned that there was something going on. Only because she seemed like a very nice person. And it was a very friendly, just real moment between two people. I'm glad that he kept that in. I think part of the criticism in all this is that we like to look up to our heroes, right? We like to look up to people who we want to model our lives after, and we want to hero worship them. And we want them to be this perfect pedestal type person. It's like we don't allow people the grace to just be human. This happens a lot with like celebrities, like Marilyn Monroe is a good example. People had this insane version of who she was as a human being in their mind, this perfect person. But, she was a real human being. She struggled with her weight, she struggled with mental health, she struggled internally with her own values, she struggled with, stretch marks. I mean, just normal human things. But it's so hard, because people idolize and worship, these celebrities that they're not allowed to be human. We're not allowed to give them that grace. And it's the same thing I think could be happening this week on social media with all the comments for Christian Guzman. Maybe as fans or observers or just people of the world, again, we just give people a little grace. I really believe if you do not have something positive to say to someone as a comment, I highly believe this. Unless someone is asking very specifically for the constructive criticism you're about to give, I really feel like you just need to hold that constructive criticism to yourself. Christian Guzman is not my brother. He's not my dad. He's not my son. He's not my boyfriend. He's not my husband. He's not my coworker. He's not my boss. He's not my employee. I have zero, zero reason to go on and make a comment that is negative on his page for any reason. That's how I feel about all people. Unless they are specifically asking for something, like sometimes videos ask, what color do you think is better? I ask on mine, please help me, with some podcast advice. I'm always interested in learning. Unless someone's saying something very specific like that, I just don't feel like you should comment on it. It's kind of like how folks will just comment on someone's weight without any, the video wasn't anything to do with weight, but then they'll comment on weight. And it's like, well, why do you think that person got upset? You could have commented on 100 million things, right? There's any topic in the world you can think of, but you chose to say something negative. And even if you thought it was coming from a place of, "Oh, I'm just helping them." If that person didn't ask for that help, you could be causing harm, mental harm. And this goes to the wider opinion that I have of the gym world, the gym community, and what we're really trying to achieve. One thing I like a lot about a lot of these different influencers, like Will Tennyson, who I really admire, and I look up to as what he did with his YouTube. He really focuses on helping people where they're at and helping those who want to be helped, right? He's not just walking around giving around advice to people who don't look interested in it, who aren't asking for it. If someone doesn't want your opinion, you don't have to force it on them. It's kind of like me making this video. I'm giving my opinion, but you don't have to listen to it. You click on it, you do it, whatever. So, comments are one of those things that I feel like the whole world on social media, any kind of platform, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Twitter's like super wild, wild west because there's not even an image of a person. You're just like word battling. So it goes real wild. But we just need to have a little bit more appreciation and grace that, you know, there is a human being tied to that account on the other end. And we just need to be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit kinder. I am not perfect. I have, written things in comments or responded to people in comments, and I wish I could take it back. If I can delete those things sometimes, after I think about it, I do take it back because I don't want to have someone who could be going through something. Me pointing it out to them isn't going to help them. Me caring and concerning from halfway around the world, and these are, again, this is not my brother, this is not an employee, this is not someone I know from work, church, home, family life, none of that. Sometimes by pointing out something, it's not helping. You're hurting someone. And why would you want to hurt someone if you look up to them? If you're disappointed and you don't want to look up to them anymore, just don't follow them anymore. Right? Just hit unsubscribe. Um I kind of feel like that's just kind of what I would like to see more as modern day social media etiquette. I don't know if that's a great word for it, but just how we treat other people. So I have some final thoughts. I'll look back at my notes. um, so here's one of the things that was my kind of like surprise, like reading into what I saw. Um, there was some there was a comment that Christian made towards the end of the video, very end. And it was about kind of like his life, more had to do with his personal life. I kind of felt like he and Heidi are probably at a point in their life where they're very soon going to get married. And they're probably already talking about children. And I say that because of her age. I remember being a 33-year-old woman. And I was just like, all I thought about was wanting to start a family because I hadn't had a child up at that point. I didn't have my daughter until I was 35 years old. But I remember by age 33, I was really, really like, oh my God. all I all I could think about, honestly, it was my number one thought every single day about. So I can understand if that is something that she has way heavily on her mind. And I say that because as women, biological creatures, it's not that you cannot have a baby or carry a baby older, right? Because obviously you can. There's lots of different celebrities that use surrogacy. But your eggs as a woman are literally created inside of you while you're still an infant inside your mom. So it's kind of crazy because when you're pregnant, if you have a female fetus inside of you, you technically have both your daughter and your potential granddaughters or grandsons inside of you all right then. Or at least the potential genetic makeup that you're going to be contributing to this whole fun thing of biology. So it's kind of a wild thought, but as eggs within a woman, as you age, the quality of the average egg, remember, there's always examples of just having a super high quality egg and being much older. That's all, that always exists. But your average egg that develops is going to be of lower and lower quality. And what that means is the genetics breakdown, it's more of a crapshoot. So literally everything after age 25 is a downhill struggle when it comes to reproduction for the female biologically. Some reproductive endocrinologists argue it's similar for men, but men can, again, still continue to produce. It's just the quality goes down. So both men and women kind of hit a biological peak around age 25. Your brain is fully formed, and reproductive speaking, that's kind of your prime. Well, because of the way the world is, most people are not having children in their early 20s or, starting even at age 25. I think a recent study just came out that women are having their first child in America. The average age is now 30 years old. Heidi is, as we know, over 30 years old, and Christian just turned 30 years old. So I think that this is a pretty keen topic on their minds. And I think part of his reason why he was so wildly excited and really focused on these goals is because I believe it is very, very possible that they are growing their family, or maybe Heidi's pregnant, and he is just over the moon. And I say that because I have personally experienced it. When you've wanted to have a baby, or like you have just found out that you're going to become a parent, you become all of a sudden hyper obsessed in a very brief window with how are you going to achieve things goal wise in the next year. Like you make like your 5 year or your 10-year goals, and you become like hyper focused on it, and you do become like a little crazy for a very short amount of time when you first get that news. I think this is my own personal opinion. I feel like it is completely plausible that one of the reasons he acted the way he did, which was totally out of character, has never happened like this before. I don't think it's drugs. I don't think he's having some kind of mental health thing. I don't necessarily think it's a lack of sleep, because he's been talking about a lack of sleep for an incredibly long time. He's a business owner. He's probably had lack of sleep for years and years now. I think it's very possible that it's related to turning 30 and possibly, changing the dynamics of his family, growing his family, because that is kind of a thing that happens. You become a little little hyper in that moment. So that's my final thought. I think it's very possible that the good news that we're going to get from him soon is, maybe a baby's on a way. That would be, I really hope, to me, that's like kind of the best case scenario. That would be like the greatest news to have. I would be incredibly happy for anyone who really is desirous of becoming a parent, getting the news that they are a parent. Like that's kind of like that's really the best news. Is when someone's really looking forward to something and they really get it. It's like you've always wanted the Nobel Peace Prize or the Nobel Prize in physics, and then you get the call that you have it. It's like I can imagine it's that level of excitement if you really want to be a parent and then you get the news that you are one. So that's kind of my closing out for this podcast. I really like Greg Doucette and a lot of his expertise and advice that he gives on his channel. I think it's really great. Sometimes his hot takes I disagree with because I think they're overly narrow to his worldview, but I understand why he does it because he's gotta he's gotta make money and he's gotta put out some controversial content. And that could be something that Christian's doing. He could be putting out like this kind of content to get a buzz. Talking about it. He kept a lot in that clip. It was a very long clip. Not like me. I try to make my podcast go for, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour because the longer the better. But that's not necessarily what a lot of people who make YouTube clips do. They edit it down to like 15, 20-minute range because that was what was popular back, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, was having these kind of like shorter videos. Now it's kind of popular to have much longer ones. So, eh. Is it possible that this whole thing and how he was acting was like intentional? I don't know. I come from back on the YouTube days when there was a lot of, the makeup companies were all competing, the influencers were all makeup obsessed. Makeup was the big thing being pushed. I'm not saying that makeup's still not being pushed, but I do feel in a lot of ways that like the gym world, the gym culture, the gym clothing, and all of those competing brands, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the controversy back with the makeup on YouTube. All the different makeup influencers, the makeup brands, everyone's getting, I represent, this makeup brand. I'm doing a review of this makeup brand. It's kind of similar with all the gym clothes and the gym world, all the different paraphernalia. You see the reviews of shoes, of lifting gear, of weights, of different gyms, of different, gym routines, different protein powders, think of all the different products that you consume as someone who goes to the gym and weight lifts. I don't go to competitions. I don't go to weightlifting competitions. I don't go to, physical competitions where they look at your body. I don't do any of that. And yet I get advertisements for all this stuff and I buy it, right? I buy protein powders, I buy creatine, I buy, gym lifting gear outfits, I buy shoes, I buy socks. There's a lot of marketing around a particular activity. And right now, an activity that's very popular is going to the gym, doing weightlifting. So, you know, causing these crazy controversies is a way of drumming up business. It happened in the makeup community. They would have all these crazy, like very non-consequential arguments with each other. I mean, it was always stupid stuff. It wasn't anything crazy. It's not like DuPont Chemical Company that dumps barrels of PFAS into, local waters and, impacts the health of millions of people for like decades. I mean, it's not like that level of crazy. Like, if we're going to get upset at people or hold owners of businesses accountable, there's a lot bigger companies causing a lot more harm in the world, just to take it into perspective to back it off a little bit. I mean, I don't think a clothing brand company of any kind, gym clothing especially, is something that we really need to stress over in life. And it's funny because, again, in the video, Christian talks about, it's something fun to do. It's just clothes. It is just clothes. But it's fun, and, like, as humans, we wanna put things on our body that make us feel confident, and even though it's just clothes, that confidence boost that you can get is real, and it is important, and it seems like he has the right intentions in his businesses. I know he talked about the business he wants to do and collaborate with his mom, that's more, I guess, streetwear type clothing. I think that's really good. Um, at the end of the day, he's just a person. We're just people. No need to put him up on a pedestal. No need to have these crazy expectations of perfection from a person. I definitely think he would benefit from having and he definitely has the money to have a team that is able to do a lot of the work for him when it comes to his YouTube channel, to the edit, to respond to comments, to do all that stuff. I know he enjoys doing it, but it's hard. He probably does need to step away a little bit from having total control over his YouTube channel. He probably should have a team that helps him more for that to help reduce his stress. He's probably just, it kinda sucks because you have to take time away from other projects, focus on a project, right? This is all about project management. Um, he needs to take some time to hyper focus on his own YouTube channel, hire the right people into it because hiring process is not easy. It's difficult. So he needs to go through a hiring process for that. He needs to have people that are going to commit to him for a certain length of time. He's got to have people contracts drawn up. I mean, it's a lot of work that goes into all of that. It's not something you can just randomly do. So I understand if people are disappointed with it or whatever, but I thought it was fun to listen to. I enjoyed it. It was entertaining to me. I felt like because it was more raw of video, I felt like it was more personal and I felt more of a buy-in to him individually. Um Even though he's just a celebrity, I don't know him at all, whatever. Um you know, these kind of like personal videos like this, I do feel you help to get to know someone. It does feel more personable. You feel more vested in whatever they have going on. So I understand why people made the comments they did, but at the end of the day, you have to intellectually step out of that and understand just because you have a feeling of closeness with someone, you're not actually close to them. So say something positive. If you like something about the video, say something else about the video. Like maybe there was an aspect of the video that you really liked. And if you want to make a comment, try to focus on reinforcing what was good instead of focusing on what was bad. I think that's something that we can kind of do. When I go to the gym, I am not 100% perfect, but I don't leave the gym feeling defeated. I'm most often, I'm not the only woman doing weightlifting, but I am almost exclusively the largest woman. You know, I have the highest body fat percentage of a woman over in the weightlifting section. But I don't leave the gym feeling defeated by that. I leave the gym thinking of all of the things that were positive about the experience, I was doing a really great job lifting. I increased this. I really hit the rep count that I wanted to hit. I advanced in some way, or sometimes the victory for the day was just going to the gym. I went to the gym. I did my hour and a half of time. I took all of my, supplements for the day. Sometimes the victories can be really small, but we need to pump up ourselves like that. So if you're a very critical person of people on social media and online, I'm going to go ahead and think that maybe you're being overly critical of yourself too. So let's be a little bit more forgiving and understanding and compassionate, and just give that grace out for people online, and then also give it to ourselves. All right. Well, that's where I want to end it. We are right at a little over 15 minutes, and I want everyone to have a really good week coming up. Hopefully, with the spring coming around, we have a lot of things going on, and we're going to give ourselves a little grace this week. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.